What's going on, everybody? Kalipus Tech here, coming back at you with another video. In this video, we're going to be doing a comparison between the Motorola Moto G Power 2022 and the Cricket Dream 5G. Now, before we go any further, I do want to remind you to go ahead and hit that subscribe button. It helps out the channel a lot. And if you want to learn more about either of these phones, be sure to check out my full reviews of them as well. But with that being said, let's get started. So the Motorola Moto G Power 2022 has a 6.5-inch 90Hz IPS LCD display with a resolution of 720p, a PPI of 270, and an aspect ratio of 20:9. We got a hole punch up here for the front-facing camera, and this camera is 8 megapixels. Now the Cricket Dream 5G has a 6.82-inch LCD display with a resolution of 720p, a PPI of 263, and an aspect ratio of 20.5:9. Now we got a water drop notch here for the front-facing camera, and this camera is 13 megapixels. So with the Cricket Dream 5G, we're getting a slightly taller and more narrow form factor, and clearly a much larger display as well. So that is going to have some advantages when it comes to content consumption, because first of all, in general, everything is going to show up larger on the Cricket Dream 5G, since it has a much larger display, and it has a taller and more narrow form factor, which is going to give stuff like videos and landscape mode a more cinematic look. And in addition to that, if you're reading something, more stuff is going to fit on the screen, so you won't have to scroll as much. Now, on the other hand, I do think the quality of the display is a little bit better on the Moto G Power 2022. The image looks a little bit sharper, the colors look better, and overall, the Moto G Power 2022 has a noticeably brighter display. I do have the brightness at 100% for both of these phones, and you can definitely see the difference. In addition to this, the viewing angles for the Moto G Power 2022 are significantly better as well, and that's going to help if you're doing something like maybe you're outside, something like that, and you're in sunlight. Overall, the Moto G Power 2022 just has a brighter, more high quality display. And to add to this, it does have a 90Hz display as well, meaning the movement on the display is going to be a little bit faster and smoother. I don't know if you can really tell a whole lot in this video, but in real life, when you're streaming videos and stuff like that, you definitely are going to notice. And in addition to that, when you're just using the phone in general with the Moto G Power 2022, that 90Hz display is going to give it a higher end, more premium type of feel. So overall, it really kind of comes down to personal preference. Would you rather have a larger display, or would you rather have a higher quality display? Because in the case of quality, I do think the Moto G Power 2022 is significantly better, but obviously the Cricket Dream 5G does have the advantage when it comes to size, and I do like the aspect ratio as well. Now both of these phones are getting 64 gigabytes of internal storage with microSD card expansion, so that is a pretty decent amount of storage. For the average user, that's going to be perfectly fine, especially since you have the microSD card expansion to offload stuff like photos and videos. Now if you're a power user, if you have a bunch of different apps and stuff like that, then you might want to look for a phone with 128 instead. But really, when it comes to entry-level phones in this general price range, there aren't a whole lot of phones with that much storage. There are a handful, but really not that many. So overall, for this price range, both of these phones have a great amount of storage. Now, one interesting feature the Cricket Dream 5G has that the Moto G Power 2022 doesn't is wireless charging. The Cricket Dream 5G actually does work with wireless charging, which I think is really cool. It's not a game changer or anything like that, but it's definitely a feature that if you have it, it is nice to be able to use. Now for the security features, the Moto G Power 2022 has Face Unlock and a fingerprint scanner right back here. With the Cricket Dream 5G, we're not getting Face Unlock, but we do have the same kind of fingerprint scanner right here on the back. So it really comes down to whether or not you want Face Unlock. If you do, then the Moto G Power 2022 is of course going to have an advantage, but if you don't care, then either of these phones will be fine because both of them have fingerprint scanners. Now with that being said, we're going to give these fingerprint scanners a try and see how well they work. So starting with the Moto G Power 2022. There we go, one more time. And there we go. So as you can see, this fingerprint scanner is real fast and responsive. No issues here. Moving on to the Cricket Dream 5G. There we go, one more time. And there we go. So both of these fingerprint scanners worked real well. I didn't really notice a difference in performance between them. So either way, you get a fingerprint scanner with these phones. Again, it really just comes down to whether or not you want Face Unlock, because if you do, the Moto G Power 2022 is going to be the one with the advantage. Now taking a look at the rear camera setups, the Moto G Power 2022 has a 50 megapixel main camera, a 2 megapixel depth sensing camera, and a 2 megapixel macro camera. The Cricket Dream 5G actually has a quad camera setup with a 48 megapixel main camera, an 8 megapixel ultra wide camera, a 2 megapixel macro camera, and a 2 megapixel depth sensing camera. Now with that being said, since they are so close in quality, I would say the overall camera advantage would go to the Cricket Dream 5G due to it having an ultra wide camera, whereas the Moto G Power 2022 has a macro camera, but the Cricket Dream 5G does have that too, so it's not really an advantage. Now for video, both of these phones can shoot in 1080p in both the rear and front cameras. Nothing extravagant here, and I definitely wouldn't say the video quality is really even going to be good enough for social media. So if you want to make videos for something like TikTok or even YouTube, I definitely wouldn't recommend these phones. But if you're shooting videos for something like Snapchat where the quality isn't very important, then they should be alright, but keep in mind the microphones on both of these phones are pretty low quality. They're really not meant for anything beyond phone calls. So if you do make videos with these phones, I wouldn't expect the best audio quality either. But again, as far as the actual camera setups, while the Cricket Dream 5G does have the advantage of having an ultra-wide camera, both of these phones can take really good pictures with their main cameras and portrait mode. So if you want to take photos to keep for social media or something like that, either of these phones will easily get the job done. Internally, the Motorola Moto G Power 2022 is getting 4 gigabytes of RAM with the MediaTek Helio G37 processor. The Cricket Dream 5G is getting 4 gigabytes of RAM as well with the MediaTek Dimensity 700 processor. So already, before even running any kind of tests or anything, the Cricket Dream 5G definitely has a processor on another level despite being in pretty much the same price range. Now with that being said, I did run Geekbench 5 benchmark tests on both of these phones. In the Motorola Moto G Power 2022 came back with a single core score of 183 and a multi-core score of 1027. The Cricket Dream 5G came back with a single core score of 545 and a multi-core score of 1666. So there's definitely a huge difference here in performance. Now when I compared the Moto G Power 2022 to the Moto G Power 2021, there was a big difference there, with the Moto G Power 2021 being quite a bit faster, but with these two phones, there's an even bigger difference. The Cricket Dream 5G is not only going to be faster during daily tasks, like sending text messages, making calls, browsing the web, going on social media. You're definitely going to have a better experience here, but it's also going to be able to run higher end games, maybe not high end like Fortnite or something like that, but definitely more graphics heavy stuff than the Moto G Power 2022 can run. So definitely keep that in mind. If you're just going to be doing more basic activities like sending text messages, making calls, that sort of thing, doing web browsing and then social media stuff more sparingly, then the Moto G Power 2022 is going to be perfectly fine. But I would say if you're going to be on your phone a lot, the Cricket Dream 5G is probably going to be a better choice here, because if you're constantly on your phone, especially if you're doing more demanding tasks, that's where the difference in performance is really going to show. And then of course, in addition to this, the Cricket Dream 5G, as the name suggests, is a 5G phone, and the Motorola Moto G Power 2022 is not. So keep that in mind as well, because with the 5G network growing more and more as time goes on, it's becoming more and more of a good idea to get a 5G phone. Now for the battery, the Motorola Moto G Power 2022 is getting a 5000 mAh battery, and the Cricket Dream 5G has a 4750 mAh battery. So this isn't a huge difference, but the Moto G Power 2022 does have a larger battery, and that means it's also going to have more longevity down the road, because as the battery degrades, you're not going to notice it as soon as you would with the Cricket Dream 5G. But this is one of those less common occasions where it's only really a marginal difference. So definitely keep that in mind. It's not going to be like night and day. So for example, if you want a phone with a lot more processing power, or with a much larger screen, or an ultra-wide camera, then I would say those advantages the Cricket Dream 5G has far outweigh the slight advantage in battery power that the Moto G Power 2022 has. Now another feature you're going to want to know about is NFC. The Moto G Power 2022 doesn't have NFC, whereas the Cricket Dream 5G does. Now in case you don't know what it is, NFC is the technology behind contactless mobile payment services like Google Pay. So if you use that feature a lot, the Cricket Dream 5G might be a better choice for you, because with this phone you actually can use Google Pay, whereas you can't with the Moto G Power 2022. Now as services that require NFC, like again Google Pay, become more and more relevant and widely used, which they already really are. I'm really hoping that Motorola starts adding it to their lower end phones, but unfortunately so far, I have yet to see a phone in the Moto G lineup that actually has NFC. Now this might be different for international variants, but so far the US variant of every Moto G phone I've ever seen doesn't have NFC, and that is really too bad because it is a useful feature that a lot of people are using. So in conclusion, which of these phones is the better device? In my opinion, despite some advantages the Moto G Power 2022 has, I would personally go with the Cricket Dream 5G in most cases. Now, on one hand, the Moto G Power has a much nicer looking, sleek, modern design, whereas with the Cricket Dream 5G, although it's not too bad, it looks a little bit lower end and kind of clunky honestly, especially with the thick bezels and the water drop notch, and the display quality in general is a lot better on the Moto G Power 2022, being significantly brighter with better viewing angles and having a 90Hz refresh rate. That may not seem to make a whole lot of difference in this video, but trust me, in person, it really does, especially if you're consuming a lot of content. Overall, I will say the Moto G Power 2022 has that advantage, but for mostly everything else, the Cricket Dream 5G is a little bit better. It has a larger display, and while I don't personally think that outweighs the quality difference with the Moto G Power 2022, it still gives us a little bit more justification in choosing the Cricket Dream 5G over the Moto G Power 2022 as far as the display is concerned. Now with the camera, it's really debatable which phone takes better photos with the main camera, but it's so close that I really wouldn't make a decision based on just that. But I will say, the Cricket Dream 5G does have an ultra-wide camera, and the Moto G Power 2022 doesn't. So if you do really like ultra-wide cameras, if that feature is important to you, definitely keep this in mind. Now as far as performance goes, there's really no question. The Cricket Dream 5G is so much faster and more powerful than the Moto G Power 2022. So if you're going to be on your phone a lot, or if you're doing more high-end activities like gaming and video editing and stuff like that, that takes up a little bit more processing power, I would definitely go with the Cricket Dream 5G. Now the battery advantage, by a very slight margin, goes to the Moto G Power 2022, but again, that's such a marginal difference compared to the other benefits the Cricket Dream 5G has over the Moto G Power 2022. And lastly, the Cricket Dream 5G has NFC, meaning you can use Google Pay, whereas you can't with the Moto G Power 2022 since it doesn't have NFC. So overall, while both of these phones are great in their own right, I personally would go with the Cricket Dream 5G in most cases, but the Moto G Power 2022, despite being a little bit of a downgrade from its predecessor in some ways, still isn't half bad either. But I hope you guys enjoyed the video, and I hope you found this information useful as well. If you did, don't forget to leave a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel. And once again, if you do want to learn more about either of these phones, be sure to check out my full reviews of them as well. But that's it for this video. As always, I will see you in the next one.